Hey, what's happening, Bridge56? Happy Sunday. Did you know that today is called Pentecost Sunday? Have you ever heard that word before? Have you ever wondered what that means? Well, that's today's question. What is Pentecost? Now, this is where I got to get a little bit real with you guys and be fully honest and let you know that not until maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago did I even really understand what that term meant. So I'm sort of jealous that you in 5th or 6th grade are already getting a big leg up on me. So we're going to talk about Pentecost today, what that means and why we celebrate it and why it's important. And I'm going to give you 3 main points that I really want you to take home with you. You're already at home, aren't you? 3 things you need to know about Pentecost. Number 1, Pentecost is the birthday of Christianity, or at least the birthday of the church. At least that's how we can look at it now for us. For the Jews, it meant something entirely different. The word Pentecost actually means the 50th day. As a Jewish celebration, it marked the 50 days after Passover, and they would celebrate this big harvest festival. It also commemorated the giving of the law to Moses on Mount Sinai. The Jews still celebrate that to this day. But for us Christians, it takes on a whole nother meaning. As I said earlier, it's kind of the birthday of the church. Our story in reference today comes from Acts chapter 2. If you haven't read Acts chapter 2, go ahead and pause the video now and go do that. This is the beginning parts of Acts. Jesus had just ascended back into heaven, and the apostles are all kind of just hanging out, wondering, what do we do next? Without Jesus, they were kind of just lost and confused. But that all changed on Pentecost. Hopefully you took the time to read through chapter 2 on your own. But if you didn't, here's kind of what happened.
The disciples and other believers are all gathered in one place, and they're praying. And all of a sudden, this fire comes out of the sky, and it seems to settle on each one of them. And each one of them starts to speak in other tongues, other languages. This then excites other believers from other places, other countries that have come to Jerusalem to celebrate Pentecost.
Are these guys talking in my language?
Then Peter stands up and gives this amazing sermon in every different language possible that everyone there just kind of understands.
What this is, guys, is the second thing that I want you to remember about Pentecost. That this was the introduction to Christians to the Holy Spirit. Up until this point in the Bible, we have a lot of interaction of God with his people and certainly with Jesus at this point. But now this is the third element, the third part of the Trinity that we get to interact with, and that we still, to this day, get to interact with, the Holy Spirit. And the introduction of the Holy Spirit is actually the fulfillment of a promise. And that's the third thing I want you to remember about Pentecost. At the end of Matthew 28, verse 20, the very last thing that Jesus says to his believers, to his followers, is that I will be with you to the ends of the age. And then he pieces out into the sky. Jesus was promising them that he wasn't going to abandon them. In fact, in another passage, John 15:26, Jesus says to the disciples, I will send you an advocate, one called the Holy Spirit. See, Pentecost is a pretty big deal for us Christians. Let's walk through those 3 things one more time. Number 1, it's the birthday of the church. It's where everything began. From that one sermon that Peter spoke in all those different languages to all those different peoples from all those different countries. They all then went home and told people what they had learned, what they had saw, and what Jesus is all about. 2, it's the introduction of the Holy Spirit. We now get to interact with God in a totally different way, a totally relational, emotional, spiritual way. And 3, it's the fulfillment of a promise. That delivery of the Holy Spirit reminds us that Jesus didn't leave us. He never abandoned us. He's still right there with us. We have a God who never leaves us, who's always there for us, to comfort us, to guide us, to direct us. What an awesome promise. So what's that mean for us now? Go celebrate. I know Pentecost isn't probably one of your major holidays that you celebrate throughout the year, but as a Christian, maybe it should be. Those 3 things are pretty important, pretty awesome things for us. But whether you go out and choose to celebrate Pentecost today or not, it doesn't matter to me. What I do want you to take away from this is that you have a God who never abandons us. We have a God who has promised to never leave us or forsake us, and he will be with us to the very ends of the earth. What an awesome promise that is. For some of us, the issue of abandonment is a really big deal. If you happen to be one of those who struggles with this issue of abandonment, maybe your parents have abandoned you, your friends have abandoned you, you have other people in your life who you really counted on that have abandoned you. I want you to hear me today. You have a God who never failed. He never has and he never will. And he has promised to never abandon you. And he's so dedicated to that promise that he came to this earth and he died for us to prove that point. But then that wasn't enough. After he died, he came back to life, and then he went back into heaven. But as he ascended into heaven, he gave us that promise that he would never leave us. And he didn't. He sent us the Holy Spirit to interact with us daily, to be our counselor, to be our guide, our comforter. And that all started at Pentecost. Have a great week, guys. I love you, and I'm praying for you. As always, I'd love to hear more from you guys. Jump over to our Facebook page. Let me know what your thoughts or questions or comments are about Pentecost and this lesson that we just had.